Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing really well. So I recently posted a video discussing the sharpening workflow and more specifically capture sharpening. Now if you're unfamiliar with either of those two things, I'll leave a link to that video in the description down below, and I suggest checking that out before you go any further with this video. Now in that video talking about capture sharpening, I briefly mentioned that it might be advantageous to sometimes selectively capture sharpen an image. And after posting that video, I received a few questions about why you would want to selectively capture sharpen an image and how we go about that. So in today's video, I want to talk about the two methods that I use to selectively capture sharpen images.
No. Pretty Caroline, oh, 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 stone cold stunner. She was a winner, started working at the dime.
Alright, so now that everyone's caught up with that previous video, I'm going to work through this process of selective capture sharpening with the assumption that everyone has a basic understanding of capture sharpening and the role it plays in creating that master file. Now in today's video, I want to talk about the two methods that I use to selectively capture sharpen images. The first method is the more basic of the two, and that is done entirely in Lightroom. The second method is a little bit more complicated. It involves Lightroom and Photoshop and gives us the opportunity to slightly fine-tune our selective capture sharpening. So before I dive into the first method of selective capture sharpening, I want to make sure it's really clear that we understand why it's advantageous to be able to selectively capture sharpen an image. Now in that previous video where I talk about capture sharpening, I mentioned a type of sharpening known as deconvolution sharpening. And the goal of deconvolution sharpening is really to bring out the finest details in an image. Now that works really great with high frequency images, edges, areas of really high detail. But the problem really comes into play when, what happens when we deconvolution sharpen a smooth surface, like a cloud or sky, for example, where there are no edges, it's not high frequency, we don't have an area of high detail. And that's really where the problem comes into play, because trying to use deconvolution sharpening on those smoother surfaces will actually, instead of sharpening anything, it'll just introduce noise. And when we talk about the goal of creating a master file, we're creating a sharp, noise-free, clean master file. That's really the goal. So by deconvolution sharpening a smooth surface, we're actually not really working towards that goal because we're introducing unnecessary noise. So by selectively capture sharpening an image, we can remove that sharpening from the smooth surfaces, thereby creating a noise-free, clean master file. So now that we have a solid understanding of why we want to selectively capture sharpen an image, we're going to hop into Lightroom and talk about that first method of selective capture sharpening. Alright, so here is an image that I've applied a few kind of global adjustments to. And right now we have the detail tab open here on the right, and we're focused on selectively capture sharpening this image. So the first thing we're going to do, as you see here, we have our sharpening, our noise reduction, our color noise reduction. These are all the default values that you see in Lightroom. So the first thing we're going to do is set this up to be deconvolution sharpened. That means we reduce our radius all the way to the left, detail all the way to the right, and I'll bring the sharpening down here off of that 40 default value. Now we're going to come into 100% viewing distance, like you need to be to properly capture sharpen an image. We're just going to be here in the middle of the image, and we're going to slowly introduce our capture sharpening. Again, this is all in that video that I posted down in the description below if you need another refresher on how to capture sharpen an image. So I'm going to bring this in, and I know that I've capture sharpened this image before just to make this a little quicker, and I know that I want my capture sharpening value to be around 45 here. I'm going to bring that color noise reduction up a little bit just to make sure we don't have any of that. And that'll do it. That is our capture sharpened image. Now, like I mentioned before, the goal in selective capture sharpening is to remove that sharpening from the smooth surfaces. Now the main smooth surface that I'm concerned about in this image is the sky here. I don't want any of this sharpened. There's no high detail, there's no high frequency, there's no edges. So any deconvolution sharpening that has been applied to the sky here is actually just introducing noise. And introducing noise is really kind of destructive to that clean, sharp master file that we are aiming for. So this first method of selective capture sharpening that we're going to do, the one that is solely in Lightroom, we're just going to come over here to the mask, and by using this mask slider, we are introducing a type of layer mask similar to that you use in Photoshop that will remove the sharpening from those smooth areas. So if we hold Option down while we move this mask slider, you can see that it is completely white. And like Photoshop, white reveals that layer, black conceals. So when we have it completely white, that means this deconvolution sharpening that we have applied is being applied to the entire image. As I slide that mask to the right, parts of it will turn black. Those black portions of the image mean that that sharpening is no longer applied. And we just want to move that slider, play around a little bit until we come to a point where we think that we've removed that sharpening from the smooth surfaces in our image and our noise performance is much better. So again, hold Option down, slide, and as we slide it, you can see we're gray here, means there's still a little bit of sharpening. And if we just keep sliding it to the right here, you can see those black sections start to mask out the sharpening in the smooth areas. And it's also masking out the sharpening in the smooth areas on the rock faces of the cliffs. And I'm totally okay with that. That's one thing about this mask feature. It's not completely fine-tuned. And you'll see what I mean by fine-tuned when we talk about that second method in Photoshop. But in this method, this is just a super quick, easy way to mask out that capture sharpening in your unwanted areas. I'm probably going to leave it somewhere around there just so I keep some of that detail in those rock faces. But again, I'll hold Option for you and click on this. You can see I've masked out that sharpening layer from the sky. And that's really helped us create a master file here that we can take into Photoshop or continue in Lightroom, wherever we want to kind of further creatively process this image in our path to creating that master file. But now we have an image here that has been capture sharpened along those high frequency, those detail areas, but we've maintained a smooth, noise-free sky where we don't want that sharpening applied. And that's really all there is to that first method. It's super simple, it's super effective, it's really quick. It's a great way to selectively capture sharpen an image. All right, so now we're gonna take a look at that second method of selective capture sharpening. It's a little bit more involved, a little bit more complex than that first method, but it gives us the opportunity to further fine tune those selective adjustments. So we're just gonna hop into Lightroom and take a look at that same image. All right, so here again, we have that same image, the same global adjustments have been made, nothing too fancy yet. And you can see that we have in our detail tab over here, the exact same default values. I've reset them from what we did before. Now, the first thing that we're gonna do in this image is we're just gonna take that sharpening down to 0. And we're gonna set the color noise reduction to 35. This part, I like my color noise reduction to be upped a little bit than what the Lightroom default value usually is. The only important part here, so in this method, we're actually gonna end up creating 2 copies of this image. So the important thing is that that color noise reduction, any luminance, any part of that noise reduction that you have applied is consistent across the 2 files. Now, it's not super crucial what those values are. I like to leave my luminance at 0. I don't like to mess with that. I like to up my color reduction a little bit. So that's all I did there. It's just, I just want to note that in both of my files that I end up having, those values need to be the same. The only thing that's going to differ is the sharpening. So I have my noise reduction values where I want to see them, and I have my sharpening at 0. So this image is completely soft. It is completely unsharpened. It is the digital copy. You know, we talked about why digital images in that previous video. We talked about why digital images are inherently soft, and that's why we have to apply this capture sharpening. So this is that soft image, completely unsharpened. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down to the thumbnail here in the bottom. We're going to right click, and we're going to come up to here to create a virtual copy. All right, so now you can see down here in the little bar, the thumbnail bar, I have 2 copies of the same image. Both of these images are completely unsharpened. So we're just going to select one of them. It doesn't really matter which one. One of them we're going to leave unsharpened, and the other one we are going to deconvolution sharpen. Now, because we just did this with our other image, we know that our value needs to be 45, radius to the left, detail to the right. Now that has deconvolution sharpened the entire image, including the sky. We have not introduced any sort of masking, and we want to leave it that way. So the next thing that we are going to do is we're going to open up both of these images, the soft one and the deconvolution sharpened one, in Photoshop. Sorry if my computer is getting a little noisy. It's working pretty hard here now that I have 2 pretty big files open. So we're just going to select both of these, highlight both of these thumbnails down here in the bottom corner. I'm going to right click on one of them. I'm going to come up here to edit in, and I'm going to select open as layers in Photoshop. Now this will probably just take just a second to open them. All right, so now we have these images opened up in Photoshop, and you can see in the bottom right hand corner we have them currently as stacked layers. Now the first thing we want to do is decide or determine which of these layers is the sharp one and which is the soft one. And that should be pretty simple. We're just going to come down here to the bottom left hand corner, and we're going to zoom in to 100%. And if we just click this top layer on and off, here's it on, take it off, put it on again, you can see that top layer. That top layer is clearly the soft layer. Our bottom layer is, you can see here, is on right now. This has been deconvolution sharpened. If we introduce this top layer, you can tell that's super soft. That has not been sharpened. Okay, so now that we know that, and it's important, if your soft layer is the one on the bottom, you need your soft layer to be that top layer. So just come over here to the bottom right hand corner, click, drag, and make sure that soft layer is the one on top. All right, now we're going to zoom back out here. So again, we have our soft layer on top, our sharpened layer on the bottom, and our goal is to introduce that soft layer to the smooth surfaces in our image where that deconvolution sharpening has caused a little bit of unnecessary noise. So to do that, we're going to select our top layer, and we're going to come down here and we're going to add a layer mask to that layer. The layer mask icon is this little rectangle with a circle in the middle, so we're just going to click on that. And you can see we have this white layer mask now to the right of our soft layer. Now, much like that layer mask that we introduced in Lightroom, white means that we're completely showing that layer. Black, we are concealing it. So we know that because this layer mask here to the right is completely white, we are showing that soft layer. So what we need to do is invert this mask. So if we go Command I, we're selected on this layer mask, and we go Command I, we have now turned it into a black layer mask. That means this layer is completely hidden right now. So all that we're seeing here now is that deconvolution sharpened layer. And now all we want to do is come over here to our brush tool, or just hit B, right? That's a little shortcut. And we want to make sure we're on the white paintbrush here. We can set our flow to 100, set our smoothing to 0, and we want to make sure we have a nice soft brush. So we want that hardness all the way to the left, and then we can use our bracket keys on the keyboard to adjust the size of our brush. And all we're going to do with our white paintbrush, And again, we're making sure that we're selected on that layer mask down here in the bottom right hand corner. We're gonna paint in that soft layer where we don't want that deconvolution sharpening applied. And I'll do this pretty roughly right now, just for the sake of time. You don't need to see me completely do this process, but we're gonna bring that brush all the way across here, you know, and I would take my time here and make sure I get this edge right. But right now, I'll just do it very roughly, just along this edge for you really quick. Again, I'm not doing this carefully. This is something that needs to be done very carefully and make sure you get it right. Otherwise, you'll get strange, kind of strange artifacts, strange things happening around your edges, and that will be quite noticeable. So again, I'm just doing this very, very quickly, and then we'll brush in across the rest of the sky. And if we hold Option and we click on this, we can see this layer mask come up. We can see the places that we missed, just to make sure that whole section is painted white. All right, and we come back down here to our full image, and now what we've done is create a layer mask that lets us apply that soft layer selectively to the sky, which really means now we have selectively we're almost to the point where we have completed that selective capture sharpening process. Now, if I was going to do the full process here, I would make sure I do that edge very carefully, and I might go in maybe to the water, some other smooth surfaces on the canyon rocks, just anywhere that I really feel it necessary. For this image, I would probably just do the sky and the water. I really want the detail on the rocks there, and that's the difference between this method and that method that you saw in Lightroom. So here we have the ability to really fine tune what we want to see. But for the sake of this video, I don't want to go on forever. So we've created that layer mask here, and all we're going to do now is we're going to right click, we're going to say flatten image, and now we have one complete image that has been selectively capture sharpened. And we can do whatever we want with it now in terms of creative processing. So now that we've taken a look at those two selective capture sharpening methods, I do want to mention that those are definitely not the only ways to do it. However, those are the two methods that I use, and I think they're two great ways to selectively capture sharpen an image. Anyways, I think I'm going to go ahead and end the video there, but I hope you found that useful, and I hope you're able to incorporate some of that into your own processing workflow. I think this dive into selective capture sharpening should kind of help round out that capture sharpening portion of the sharpening workflow. If you have any questions about any of that, please feel free to reach out. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye.